"Miss Carter, would you mind stepping into my office?" That one sentence, spoken with a gentle smile by the bank manager, knocked the wind clean out of me. I had walked into the bank just to pull out a little cash for groceries and Sunday offering. I walked out knowing my life savings had nearly vanished. It was a Thursday morning like any other. The air was crisp, the coffee still warm in my thermos, and I'd just gotten back from the pharmacy. I stopped by the First Horizon Bank on Elm Street, same branch I'd used for over 2 decades, ever since they opened across from the old hardware store back in '98. I didn't expect anything unusual. I needed $100 for groceries, a little for the church plate, and maybe enough left for another tube of arthritis cream. Nothing more. I walked up to the counter and smiled at the young teller behind the bulletproof glass. Her name tag said Riley, and though I didn't know her well, I'd seen her there before. I handed her my debit card and ID, same way I'd done dozens of times. She smiled back politely, but the moment her eyes hit the screen, I knew something was off. Her face froze just for a second, and then she tried to recover with one of those polite, practiced grins. "Just a moment. Miss Carter," she said. "Let me check something real quick." Then she disappeared into the back. I stood there waiting, trying not to think too hard about it. Maybe it was a computer glitch. Maybe she just needed authorization. But after a few minutes, the branch manager came out, Elise Monroe, mid-30s, sharp suit, always composed. I'd met her once before when I lost my ATM card, and she helped me cancel it. She walked toward me with a soft, sugar-coated tone that set my nerves on edge. "Miss Carter, would you mind stepping into my office?" she asked. That's all it took to turn my stomach into knots. Her office was small. Glass walls all around, a fake fern in the corner, and that same squeaky chair I remembered from last time. She laid a paper statement in front of me and pointed to the number at the bottom. "Your available balance is $312, she said gently. I blinked. That can't be right. "I thought so too," she replied. So I double-checked. "It seems there have been several large transfers from your account over the past few months, all to an entity called L&G Holdings, LLC. I didn't speak. I just stared at the numbers. The transfers were massive, $5,000, $12, $500, $18, $700, all labeled the same way, all gone. My hands began to tremble. My heart thudded so loud I could hear it in my ears. I had worked for that money all my life, 40 years in a high school cafeteria, rising at 5 a.m. to bake biscuits and scrub pots. That money wasn't just numbers. It was my security, my dignity, my future. And in a matter of moments, I realized someone had taken it. I don't know how long I sat in that little glass office. Time felt like it stopped the moment Elise slid that paper across the desk. At first, I thought maybe the bank had made a mistake, a system glitch, someone else's statement, but the numbers were mine. The transfers were real, and every single dollar had vanished under my name. My fingers gripped the edge of the chair, heart pounding like it was trying to break free from my chest. I looked at the list again, lines and lines of transactions, everyone marked L&G Holdings, LLC. Some were small, but most weren't. 5,000, 12,000, 18,000, one right after another, like a steady bleed from a wound I didn't know I had. "I don't know what that is," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I don't have a business." Elise gave me that soft kind of smile people offer when they don't have real answers. "It could be fraud," she said gently. "If you'd like, we can set you up with someone in our financial protection team. And if you want to report this to law enforcement, the bank will fully cooperate." I nodded slowly, thanked her, took the printed statement, and walked out into the sunshine. Though it didn't feel like sun on my skin anymore, everything felt different, disconnected, like I was floating in someone else's life. When I got home, I didn't take off my shoes. I didn't hang up my purse. I just walked to the kitchen table and sat down. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that buzzes in your ears and makes you feel like a shadow in your own home. I unfolded the statement and laid it out in front of me. My eyes followed each transfer like steps into a hole I hadn't seen coming. I tried to think back. Had I missed a letter? Signed something I didn't read? But deep down, I knew better. I've been careful my whole life. Frugal. Smart. I've never handed over access to anyone. My hands were shaking. My stomach twisted. That money wasn't just money. It was 40 years of sacrifice. I'd worked in a school cafeteria for most of my life, up before dawn, on my feet for hours, wiping down tables, mopping floors, boiling grits for kids who never said thank you. I missed birthdays, skipped doctor appointments. I kept working while friends retired because I wanted to grow old with dignity without having to ask for help. And now, it was nearly gone. I thought of my son, my only child, Devin Carter. He'd always been smart, slick-talking, and ambitious. Lately, he'd been talking a lot about real estate, always on the phone, always closing deals. Just last month, he showed up in a brand new SUV, said he finally had things in motion. I figured maybe he was finally settling down, building something for himself. But now I wasn't so sure. I reached for the phone and dialed his number. He picked up after the second ring. "Hey, Mama, everything okay?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "I went to the bank today." I said, "My account, it's almost empty." There was a pause, too long. Then he laughed, light and casual. "Oh, that. Yeah, I moved some of your funds. Nothing to worry about. It's all safe, just some business stuff." "Business," I said. "You didn't tell me anything about that. We talked about this months ago," Devin said, like I'd forgotten. "You told me to handle it for you. Remember, I set up a holding account. It's working for you now." "No, Devin," I said firmly. "I never told you to do that. I never gave you permission. You probably just forgot." He replied, the edge in his voice creeping in. "You signed the papers. Mama, it's already handled." I couldn't speak for a second. My breath caught in my chest. "I want to see those papers," I said. He sighed. "I'll show you. Don't worry. Still your money, it's just working harder now." He hung up after that. Just like that. Like none of it mattered. I stared at the phone for a long time. Then I looked up at the photo on my fridge. Devin at 5 years old, missing his front teeth, smiling like the world hadn't yet taught him how to lie. I thought about every night I worked late, every dollar I saved, every time I told myself it would be worth it for his future, and now all I could hear was his voice in my head. "You probably just forgot." But I didn't forget. I remembered everything, and for the first time in my life, I realized my son had taken something from me that he had no right to touch. I didn't sleep well that night, even after I put away the statement and turned off the lights. My mind kept spinning. The numbers on that paper haunted me like ghosts. I knew what I had saved. I knew how hard I'd worked for every dollar. And yet, somehow, all of it had been moved without a single word to me, without a phone call, without permission. I kept thinking about what Devin had said. "You told me to handle things for you. You signed the papers." But I hadn't. I've never handed over power of attorney to anyone, not after the scare a few years ago when I'd trusted a neighbor to help me with a utility bill and it nearly turned into a mess. Since then, I've kept everything locked tight. Passwords written down in a notebook tucked under my bread box. Statements in a file folder labeled important, triple-checked every month. I'm not careless. I don't forget. But Devin had sounded so sure, like I was the one who'd made a mistake. Still, something didn't sit right. His tone, the way he rushed me off the phone, the way he said, "It's handled like I had no say in the matter." So the next morning, I called my nephew. Tariq Ellison is Gloria's boy, my sister's youngest. He's 29, works in cybersecurity. Quiet as a church mouse, but sharp as a tack. Still calls me Aunt Ruthie. Still brings me lemon bars on my birthday. If there was anyone I trusted with my computer and my questions, it was Tariq. He showed up just before 10 a.m. with his laptop under one arm and a bag of blueberry muffins in the other. "I got them from that bakery near 47th, he said, setting them on the counter. Still warm. We didn't waste time. I poured coffee while he booted up his machine. I handed him the bank statement, and he got to work. Within 20 minutes, he'd pulled up my account activity, filtered the transfers, and found an email thread tied to my name. "Did you send this?" he asked, turning the screen toward me. I leaned in. It was a scan of a legal document, power of attorney. My name was on it, my signature, too. But something was off. The R in Ruth Carter didn't curl the way I always wrote it. And the date, it was 2 months ago. The same week Devin bought that fancy new SUV. "No," I said slowly. "That's not mine. I never signed that." Tariq sat back in his chair, face grave. Then someone forged it. He clicked a few more times. According to this, Devin created a business account under the name L&G Holdings. He listed you as a silent investor. That POA document gave him legal control over your funds, at least. That's how the bank sees it. I stared at the screen. My throat went dry. I never told him to do that. I said, "Not ever." "I know," Tariq said, "but unless we do something, he can keep pulling money. As long as that paper exists, he has authority." He paused, then added, more gently, "Aunt Ruthie, we need to call a lawyer." I felt my heart sink. Not because he was wrong, but because he was right. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. It was betrayal by my own son. I leaned back in my chair, cardigan pulled tight around my shoulders, and stared out the window at the oak tree in the yard, its branches bare in the winter light. For years, I'd thought of Devin as ambitious, sharp, maybe a little too smooth for his own good, but still my boy. Now I realized something else. He hadn't just taken my money. He'd stolen my trust. And that kind of theft cuts deeper than any balance sheet can show. I spent the next few days in a fog. I'd always believed that if you raised your child with love, taught them right from wrong, gave them all you had, then they'd turn out to be someone you could be proud of. But what do you do when the person you love the most is the one holding the knife? I needed answers more than anything. I needed to look into Devin's face and see if he understood what he'd done, if there was even a shred of guilt left in him. So I called him and invited him over for Sunday dinner. I didn't mention the account. I didn't mention the forged papers. I just told him I was making his favorite roast chicken, collard greens, candied yams, and sweet tea the way he liked it, extra cold and extra sweet. He arrived a little after 6 with his wife, Candace, right behind him. She wore a white blouse tucked into tailored jeans, a gold necklace that caught the light, and her usual camera-ready smile. She hugged me and told me the house smelled like her childhood. I nodded politely and told them to come on in. I had set the table with my good dishes, the glass plates I usually saved for Thanksgiving, and the cloth napkins I'd ironed that morning. I wanted it to feel warm, familiar. I wanted to believe that maybe the little boy who used to bring me dandelions in the spring still lived somewhere inside the man in front of me. Dinner was pleasant on the surface. Devin talked about a new development deal in Atlanta. Candace mentioned her lifestyle blog being picked up by a sponsor. They laughed, they ate, they complimented the chicken like everything was normal. But it wasn't. And when the plates were cleared and the tea had been poured, I set down my glass and folded my hands in my lap. Devin, I began, careful with my tone. I went to the bank last week. He stopped mid-sip. They told me someone moved over $100,000 from my account. Every transfer went to something called L&G Holdings. He blinked, then leaned back in his chair. Right. That's the investment account. We talked about this. Remember, no. I said, we didn't. I never agreed to that. I never signed anything. Candace reached across the table, her voice soft. Miss Ruth, I remember a while back you were saying how overwhelmed you felt bills, online accounts, passwords. Maybe that's when you asked Devin to step in. I pulled my hand back gently. I said he could help me with groceries, not wipe out my life savings. Devin's voice sharpened, just slightly. Mama, you signed the papers. I have them. I remember what I signed. I said, firmer now. And I remember telling you that money was for emergencies, not for some LLC I've never even heard of. Candace went quiet. Her smile faded. From the far end of the table, Tariq, who had been sitting quietly all evening, finally spoke up. She didn't sign those papers. Devin, I checked the document. That signature was forged. What you did was fraud. Devin snapped his head toward him like a whip. This has nothing to do with you. Tariq, you're not family. Tariq's voice stayed calm. She's my aunt. That makes it my business. You're just a nosy outsider. Stay in your lane. I stood then, my hands shaking. That's enough, both of you. I turned to my son, looked him in the eye. I raised you better than this. I said, my voice trembling. I broke my back to save that money. I went without so you could have what you needed. I pawned my wedding ring so you could walk into graduation looking like you belonged. And you took everything I worked for like it was owed to you. Devin rolled his eyes. You're acting like I stole it. I'm investing it. Mama, you'll see. Tears welled up in my eyes before I could stop them. Please, baby, I whispered, just give it back. We don't need to do this. You can fix it. He looked at me, and I swear something cold passed across his face. You can't even walk up the stairs anymore, he said. What do you need that kind of money for? The room went silent. Even Candace looked stunned. Her mouth parted like she hadn't expected him to say it out loud. I covered my mouth, barely breathing. Tariq stood up slowly, stepping between us. That's your mother, he said. What the hell is wrong with you? Devin snapped. You don't know what I've been carrying. You don't know what this family needs. No, I said, nearly gasping. You don't get to say that. I carried you for 9 months and 44 years after that. Devin grabbed his coat and walked out without looking back. Candace followed, silent. After the door closed, I sank into my chair. My whole body was trembling. Tariq stood by the wall, his voice low. You gave him every chance, Aunt Ruth. Now we need to fight back. I didn't speak for a long moment. The shame, the sorrow, the shock, it all pressed on me like a weight I couldn't lift. But then I nodded. Just once. Find me a lawyer, I said. Because love doesn't mean letting yourself be stolen from. The house felt heavier after Devin left. The scent of roast chicken still lingered in the air. The plates sat untouched by the sink, and my good tablecloth used only for holidays was stained with sweet tea, but none of it mattered. I kept hearing his voice in my head, like it was etched into the walls. What do you need that kind of money for? Like I was a burden, like I'd lived too long. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat in my living room with the lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the creaks of my old house settling into silence. I thought about every biscuit I baked, every school lunch I served, every mop I pushed across cafeteria floors to build that savings. I didn't cry anymore. I had moved past tears. By morning, my decision was made. Tariq had already been one step ahead of me. He'd made a few calls and found someone, a lawyer who specialized in elder law, someone who understood how it felt to be betrayed by blood. Her name was Nova Perryman, and Tariq told me she used to work in corporate law before her own aunt had been scammed by a caregiver. After that, she'd changed course, started fighting for folks like me. Nova came to the house that Thursday afternoon. She wore slacks, a fitted jacket, and a leather bag slung across her chest. Her voice was steady, her eyes sharp, but there was warmth behind them too, like someone who had seen enough heartbreak to know when to tread gently. I'd already cleaned the kitchen 3 times before she arrived, made fresh sweet tea, set out lemon cookies like it was Sunday company. I wasn't sure what to expect, wasn't sure how to sit across from a stranger and tell her my only child had stolen everything I'd built. But Nova didn't push. She opened a notepad and let me speak. I started from the beginning, the bank visit, the statement, the forged signature. I told her about Devin's call, the dinner, the confrontation, about how I'd begged him, pleaded, and how he'd looked me in the eye and still said no. Nova took notes quietly, her pen scratching like a heartbeat. Then she asked, "Do you have the original power of attorney you had with your son, the one you revoked?" I nodded and went to the drawer by the fridge. It was still there, filed away under important a label that now felt like a lifeline. I handed it to her. She compared the original document with the forged one Tariq had printed. The dates didn't match. The formatting was off, and my signature, the real one, was nothing like the one used to drain my account. "This new document was submitted after the original was revoked," she said, pointing at the screen. "That's identity theft. And more than that, it's elder financial abuse." I swallowed hard, but my throat felt dry. My hands rested in my lap, fingers trembling. Nova looked up. "You don't need to decide everything today, but if you want to move forward, I can help you. We'll file a report, freeze any further activity, and begin building a case." I looked at Tariq, who'd stayed quiet the entire time. His jaw was clenched, but his eyes were steady. He was watching me not to pressure, but to protect. I whispered, "I don't want him to go to jail." Nova gently set her pen down. "You're his mother," she said. "You gave him life. He gave you betrayal. That doesn't make you the one who needs to feel guilty." Her words sat heavy on my chest, because deep down, I did feel guilty, not for pressing charges, but for raising someone who could look at his own mother and see a bank account instead of a person. After a long pause, I nodded slowly. "Do it," I said. "Let's move forward." Nova smiled gently. "You're doing the right thing." We filed the police report the next morning. Nova handled the paperwork while I signed, my hand unsteady but my resolve firm. She said we had enough evidence to subpoena Devin's bank records, trace the IP addresses tied to the forged documents, and prove intentional fraud. Judges, she said, don't look kindly on children bleeding their parents dry. It would take weeks, maybe months. There would be hearings, evidence, and more hard truths. But as I stood outside that police station with Tariq by my side and Nova locking the folder shut, I realized something important. I wasn't just protecting my savings anymore. I was reclaiming my dignity, and this time I wouldn't back down. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse smelled like lemon polish and cold paper. That's something you don't forget. The scent of clean floors and old truths. I walked through the heavy doors with my back straight, though my knees ached something awful. Tariq was at my side, steady, quiet, protective as ever, and Nova walked a few steps ahead of us, holding the case folder like it was a shield. I wore my late husband's funeral brooch that day. It didn't match my outfit, but I needed something strong, pinned to my chest, something that reminded me I'd survived harder days than this. We sat on the left side of the courtroom. I folded my hands in my lap and kept my eyes on the judge's bench. I didn't dare look toward the door until I heard the click of shoes echo against the floor. Devin walked in wearing a crisp charcoal suit and a silver tie I'd never seen before. He didn't glance in my direction. He looked straight ahead, jaw tight, eyes cold. Candace followed behind him, dressed in pearls and a pale blue blouse. But she didn't say a word either. She didn't even look at me. When the judge, Honorable Lionel Drayton, entered the room, everyone stood. He was a man in his 60s, with kind eyes but a voice that didn't waver. Nova had told me he had a reputation for being strict when it came to elder abuse. I hoped, quietly, that he would see through my son's polished shoes and clean shave and hear the truth beneath it all. Tariq was the first to testify. He explained everything clearly: the bank transfers, the forged power of attorney, the digital footprints linking it all to Devin's home computer. He pointed out how the signature didn't match, how the document was submitted after the original had been revoked. His voice never shook, not once, not even when Devin's attorney tried to rattle him. Next came the financial expert Nova had brought in. She broke it all down, how the bank had accepted the fake POA because it looked legitimate, how the funds had been drained over 10 months in amounts too large to ignore. $132,000, she said clearly, gone. Then Nova stood up, and I watched her become something fierce. She walked the judge through every page, every statement, every lie. She held up the original power of attorney, the one Devin and I had revoked together years ago, and laid it next to the forged one. She read my affidavit out loud. My words echoed across that courtroom like they were being carried by wind. Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Carter, would you like to speak?" My hands trembled as I stood, but I did stand. And I walked to the witness chair, looked Judge Drayton in the eye, and swore to tell the truth. I worked in a school cafeteria for 40 years. I began. My voice was soft, but it held. I scrubbed grease traps, baked biscuits at 5 a.m, and served food to children who didn't always say thank you. I saved every month because I didn't want to grow old needing help. I wanted to grow old with dignity. I looked at Devin then. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. I gave my son everything. I skipped meals so he could eat. I pawned my wedding ring to buy him a suit for graduation. And when I found out he'd taken my life savings, I didn't scream. I didn't call the police right away. I invited him to dinner. I begged him. And do you know what he said to me? I paused, my chest heaving. He told me, "What do you need that kind of money for?" Like I was already gone. There was a hush in the courtroom. Not a breath stirred. I didn't come here to ruin my son's life, I said. I came here because he already ruined mine, and I want it back. When I finished, Nova touched my shoulder gently. I returned to my seat. Devon's lawyer tried to paint it as a misunderstanding, said Devon believed he had my permission, that it was all a family matter, nothing more. But the judge didn't take many notes. And when Devon finally took the stand, he sounded rehearsed. He said I told him to handle things, that I had too much on my plate. He never once said sorry. When asked directly if he had written permission to transfer the funds, he stumbled. Well, she signed the numbers Judge Drayton interrupted. Did she give you permission for these transfers? It was implied. Devon said. Nova stood for one final question. Mr. Carter, do you believe that draining your elderly mother's pension without clear consent was the act of a loving son? Devon didn't answer. The judge closed his folder. I'll deliver my ruling in the morning. As we left the courtroom, I didn't feel relief. Not yet. But I knew I'd spoken the truth. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel ashamed. The morning of the sentencing came with a quiet that settled deep in my bones. I had barely slept the night before. Not because I was nervous. I wasn't. I was just tired. Tired in a way that no nap or cup of tea could fix. I sat by the window as the sky turned gray, watching the neighborhood cats tiptoe across the sidewalk like shadows. The world kept turning, even as mine felt like it was holding its breath. I wasn't angry anymore, not like before. I wasn't heartbroken either. I had already grieved the son I thought I raised. What was left was something else resolve, maybe, or closure, if you want to call it that. Tariq arrived early. He didn't say much, just opened the car door for me, made sure I had my walking cane, and adjusted the scarf around my shoulders like he always did when the wind picked up. He looked like he hadn't slept either. We met Nova outside the courthouse. She stood near the stone steps with that leather folder tucked under her arm, eyes focused, back straight. She gave us both a quiet nod, no pep talk, no reassurances. She knew we were past that now. Inside, the courtroom was nearly empty. No jury, just Judge Drayton behind the bench, a state prosecutor across from Nova, and us seated quietly in the gallery. Devon arrived 5 minutes later. Same slicked back hair, same polished suit. He didn't look at me. Janice wasn't with him this time. When the judge called the session to order, my heart gave a soft thud. Not from fear, just from the weight of what was coming. Judge Drayton cleared his throat, then began in that low, steady voice that made everyone else fall silent. This court has reviewed all submitted evidence regarding Mr. Devon Carter's unauthorized use of a revoked power of attorney to access and transfer $132,000 from the pension account of his mother, Mrs. Ruth Carter. He looked up right at Devon. What we have here is not just a breach of trust, he said. It is a calculated, sustained effort to rob an elderly parent of her financial stability under the false veil of family responsibility. Devon shifted slightly in his seat, but said nothing. No apology, no remorse, just a blank face, like he was waiting for this to be over. Then the judge turned to me, Mrs. Carter, before I deliver sentencing, would you like to address the court? I stood, slower than I used to, but steady. My hands didn't tremble this time. I didn't come here to punish my son, I said softly. I came because I had no other choice. I looked at the judge first, then slowly turned to face Devin. I hadn't looked him in the eyes since I took the stand. I raised my son alone after my husband died. I worked long days in a cafeteria, skipped meals, and never once asked for help. I didn't have much, but I made sure he had everything he needed. And when I found out what he'd done, when I saw the papers and the transfers and the lies, I didn't scream. I didn't go to the police. I invited him to dinner. I begged him, and he told me I didn't need that kind of money anymore. I paused, breath catching in my throat. He broke my heart, but I still don't want revenge. I just want peace. I returned to my seat. Nova reached over and gently squeezed my hand. Judge Drayton nodded. Mrs. Carter, your mercy is admirable, and your dignity is something this court deeply respects. But justice serves more than the injured. It protects the community. He turned back to Devin. His voice sharpened. For the theft of $132,000 through fraudulent use of power of attorney, elder financial abuse, and wire fraud, this court sentences you to 5 years in state prison. You are further ordered to pay full restitution to Mrs. Carter with interest. Your business license is permanently revoked, and you are barred from operating under any fiduciary authority for the duration of your sentence and beyond. Devin blinked. No tears, no reaction. When the bailiff asked him to stand, he did, hands behind his back. They cuffed him not roughly, just finally, as he was led away. I saw it, the flicker of panic. Not for the prison time, I think, but because for the first time in his life, someone told him no and made it stick. Outside the courtroom, Janice stood near the steps. She looked different. No makeup, no earrings, just pale and tired. I didn't know it would go this far, she whispered. I thought he was just managing your account. I'm sorry, Miss Ruth, truly. I looked at her. I didn't say much. Just let the silence fill the space between us. Then I said quietly, I carried him for 9 months, raised him for 44 years, but I couldn't stop him from destroying us. She nodded, didn't argue, just stepped back and walked away. Tariq came to stand beside me. He didn't say a word, just rested a hand gently on my shoulder. And we went home. The courthouse faded in the distance behind us. But the truth I'd spoken there, I carried that with me. And for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't carrying shame. It was nearly a month after the sentencing when the first restitution check arrived. I stood by the mailbox, fingers trembling just a little as I tore the envelope open. My name was printed neatly across the top, Ruth A. Carter. I hadn't seen it written that way in months, not on a balance sheet, not on a bank form, not where it counted. Just that alone made me feel like something was being restored. The check wasn't much, just a few $100s, but it felt heavier in my hands than the amount suggested. It was the first piece of my life coming back to me, not from kindness, but from accountability. I used it to fix the front steps. Those steps had been broken for over a year. Devin used to say, Don't worry, Mama. I'll get to it after I close the next deal. He said it so many times I stopped believing it. But that week, I sat in my living room and watched a kind-faced man in thick gloves measure, hammer, and paint over the cracks. By sundown, the steps were steady again. I walked up and down them twice, just to feel the strength in my knees, to remind myself I could still stand on my own. Word got around town eventually. Folks whispered that Devin had filed for bankruptcy, that he was crashing on a friend's couch on the east side. Some said he was sleeping on an air mattress in a garage, working odd handyman jobs under fake names to avoid wage garnishment. Janice left him within a month, packed up her things and moved back to Atlanta to live with her sister. I didn't hear from her, but a cousin told me she found a job at a department store and stopped wearing her wedding ring. I didn't feel angry about it, just tired. I'd stopped expecting anything from that household a long time ago. Sometimes I wonder if Devin ever thinks about what he did. Not with hate, not with spite, just with curiosity. I wonder if the silence in that jail cell ever pressed on him the way the silence in my kitchen did. That first day I found out. I never visited. He never wrote. The last words he said to me still echo sometimes. What do you need that kind of money for? It's strange how words from your own child cut deeper than any stranger ever could. But I also knew something else. I couldn't carry him anymore. Not the guilt, not the shame, not the weight of his choices. I gave him my body, my time, my trust, my savings. And when he took it all, I gave him one final thing he never asked for consequences. One evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea in my hands, the steps beneath me solid and freshly painted. A little girl named Laya, 2 houses down, skipped past with her jump rope and waved. "Hi, Miss Ruth," she yelled, grinning through her missing front teeth. I smiled. "Hey there, baby." She laughed and ran down the sidewalk, her voice bright against the golden light of the setting sun. And in that moment, I realized something. My life was mine again. Not perfect, not untouched, but mine. Tariq still came by every week. Always brought something, a peach cobbler, a new phone charger, sometimes just a story from work. He didn't have to say much. His presence reminded me that not all family will fail you. Some stay, some stand. One evening, he asked, "You think he regrets it?" I looked out across the yard, watched a bird land on the fence, then take off again. "Maybe one day," I said, "but regret doesn't fix broken steps, and it sure doesn't bring back what a mother gave." He nodded. I sipped my tea and let the breeze roll through me, clean and cool and unburdened. Then I looked at Tariq and said it out loud, quiet but firm. I gave him everything I had, but I kept my name, and I won't let anyone take that from me. And this time, I meant it. There's something about sitting on a porch at sunset that makes the world feel gentler than it really is. The sky turns gold, the air softens, and for a little while, everything painful feels like it's holding its breath. That's how it felt the day I truly let go, not of the past, not of the memories, but of the weight. Tariq was beside me, as he often is these days. He didn't say much, just handed me a glass of sweet tea and watched the sky turn shades of orange and lavender. That kind of silence is sacred, the kind you share with people who've seen you at your lowest and stayed anyway. He looked over after a while and asked, "You think Devin regrets it?" I didn't answer right away. I watched a bird land on the railing, looked at the cracks on my neighbor's driveway, listened to the wind as it whispered through the leaves. Maybe one day. I finally said, "But regret doesn't fix what's broken, and it sure doesn't restore what a mother gave, because what I gave my son went far beyond money. I gave him years of sacrifice. I gave him birthday cakes I baked after 12-hour shifts. I gave him second chances when he didn't deserve them, and silence when I should have said more. I gave him all the best parts of me, and when he took what wasn't his, I did something I never thought I could. I took a stand, not out of anger, but out of love for myself. Because here's what I've learned. Love does not mean surrender. It doesn't mean allowing yourself to be used, to be silenced, to be taken from until there's nothing left. Love, real love, has boundaries and courage. It takes courage to look your own child in the eye and say, enough. It takes strength to walk into a courtroom and speak the truth when your heart is breaking. And it takes grace to let go of bitterness and still hold on to your name, your story, your dignity. I didn't want revenge. I still don't. I wanted peace. I wanted to feel safe in my own home, knowing that my savings, my identity, and my voice weren't up for grabs. And now, sitting on this porch, watching the last light fade from the sky, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time: freedom. I am not the sum of what was stolen. I am not the years I lost or the tears I cried. I am the woman who stood up, who spoke out, who took her name back and made sure it stayed hers. To anyone listening, especially if you're older, if you've worked your whole life just to get by, and if someone you love has made you feel like you're a burden, hear me now, you are not invisible. Your voice matters, your story matters, and you have every right to protect what you've built, even if it means standing up to someone you once carried in your arms. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart in any way, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from or what part of this journey resonated with you. It helps me feel a little less alone in all of this. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support means more than you know, and it helps me keep sharing stories that remind us we're never too old to speak up, never too late to heal, and never without value. Take care of yourselves and take care of your names. You've earned them. The day the restitution check came, I stood at my mailbox longer than I should have. My name was printed across the top: Ruth A. Carter, clear, proud, untouched. It reminded me that I still had something no one could take: my name, my voice, my truth. That money, piece by piece, was being returned to me. But more than that, I was returning to myself. I watched the steps being fixed, the wood laid down strong beneath my feet, and I knew I had chosen to fight, not because I wanted to win against my son, but because I had to stand up for the woman who raised him, for the woman who sacrificed, for the woman who mattered these days. I sit on my porch and sip sweet tea with my nephew, the sun painting the yard gold. My house is quieter. My heart is too. But in that quiet is peace, and I earned every bit of it. Sometimes the hardest thing we'll ever do is stand up to the ones we love. But silence does not equal love, and sacrifice does not mean surrender. Protecting yourself, your dignity, your savings, your voice is not betrayal. It is strength, and it is necessary. You are never too old to reclaim your power, and never too late to say, I deserve better. If this story moved you or reminded you of someone you care about, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share your reflections in the comments. Your voice matters. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story that might speak straight to your heart.